You know, I used to think I was pretty good. What's up, everyone? I'm Jack Fossett. Welcome to Real Guitar Talk. Now, today we are going to take a trip down memory lane and do something totally different. I'm going to react to some of my old guitar solos from about 16 years ago. This is when I was in an original band called The Common Senses. I know what you're about to say. Yes, I'm totally aware of what an awful, awful band name that was. 5 guys could not agree on a band name. Eventually we got so frustrated we just settled on something. We even tried one of those online band name generator things for a while. It was my first original band though, and for all we weren't, we were a pretty good band, and I really enjoyed being in that band. It was the first time I played some original stuff that I had written, some of which you are going to hear. And so we're listening back to see how good or bad were the solos that I used to play. I had only been playing guitar for about 4 or 5 years at this point. So I was still pretty new, but, you know, really kind of cutting my gig teeth and performance teeth and everything. And, you know, we were a fun college band, and I really enjoyed it. So without further ado, let's dive in. We're going to listen to solos from a handful of original tunes as well as a few covers from different gigs in that era. Now, I apologize in advance because the audio in this is not going to be great. I used to just bring a little camcorder to gigs and videotape us, and I shared them in the early days of YouTube in hopes that someone would pick us up and we'd become, you know, the greatest band since the Beatles. Hey, that's what we all thought when we were in college, right? So anyway, let's have a listen. This first one was at a place called Club 302 in Windham, Maine, and we were playing Sam Cooke, Bring It On Home. This was using my Seafoam Green with matching headstock Stratocaster, which I still have, and I was playing into a Mesa Boogie Nomad. Take it away, Jack. Some of those early bends were a little rough. A little attitude in there. But that being said, so I remember that day. It was late February 2010. And I had just switched over to using 11 gauge strings. I don't even use those anymore. I actually use 9s on a Stratocaster now, or a Telecaster. And I was struggling to figure. I remember that was a rough gig because I was struggling to figure out the bends. I was such a poser. Did you see that with the like? Oh, totally fake. That was totally performative. But you know what? The crowd loved it. I had people come up to me after the show just like, "Oh man, I loved it. You were so into it and you were just hitting the..." I remember people coming up to me and saying that after. So the crowd loves it. Sometimes, you know, but if we're being perfectly honest, like, you know, if I were playing a lead and not worried about the way that I looked, I the whole time kind of just, you know, I smack my lips a little, so it would be like that. I'd never do the like, but hey, if the crowd loves it, man, do what you got to do. All right, let's check out another one. This was from a really cool gig on Cliff Island. My brother-in-law Dale is from Cliff Island in Maine, and we used to do this show. I actually did it 3 or 4 times with different bands, and we would play right on the wharf at sunset in July. It was a blast of a show. This was a solo that I played on my good friend Nick Salve's original song called Hey Jazz. This was a solo that I was actually pretty proud of. So let me see if I'm still proud of it after all these years. Okay, again, this is a solo I was pretty proud of. The bends were a little off. something that I would again kind of like want to. I'd attack those bends a little bit differently, especially if it's a high bend and you really want to nail that note. There's a bunch of ways you can go about it. One of the things is I might kind of more slowly lean into it nowadays. The tone wasn't quite thick enough. It was a little bit piercing sounding. That was a Telecaster, actually. An old Telecaster that I don't have anymore, that I miss. That was playing into my custom 72 coupe, which is going to be in a bunch of these clips. And I didn't quite stick the landing coming off of one of the bends too, but again, that was one of the first times I worked really hard on coming up with a good solo for Nick, for his song. I really wanted to write a memorable solo, and I feel pretty good about that. That's okay. That's better than decent, I want to say. Now, when it comes to the whole scripting solo things, it's interesting. Leave this in the comments. If you're someone who plays in original bands or cover bands or whatever, do you really script out solos? Do you write them note for note, and do you try and kind of play them the same? Do you totally improvise, or somewhere in the middle? I do all of those things. And what I often settle on, particularly if it's songs that we play regularly, is there will be parts of a lead that are pretty scripted, but then other parts where I sort of let myself improvise it. It helps keep it fresh and new, but also gives me something to anchor. And a lot of the time, what I used to do is I would sort of find the solo by playing something different at a lot of gigs, and eventually you'd kind of whittle your way through it. Or, between practice and gigs, you'd sort of eventually find the melody of a lead that you were looking for. All right, let's go on to another cover. This is a lead I played. This was a club in Portland, Maine called Bullfini's, and we were playing Ain't No Sunshine. Let's hear how it sounds. Okay, not terrible. Definitely not up to a standard I would hold myself to now. Just a couple of timing errors in there. The phrasing I actually don't think was that bad. It was a couple. In fact, there were a couple of cool little licks and things that I don't even think I play anymore. I was definitely still trying to figure out my vibrato. That's one of the first things that stood out to me. It was kind of like, it wasn't awful, but it was sort of like in that era of like, you're supposed to just kind of shake the note, but you haven't quite figured out what way is you yet. So you sort of, you pose with it a little bit. You'd be a little bit of a poser, trying to figure out your vibrato. So all in all, not terrible. That's one of my favorite guitars. It was a red Stratocaster. All these are actually Stratocaster. I was really into Stratocasters back then. I still love them. This was my favorite red Stratocaster, and I was actually playing into an Ampeg Reverberocket 2. If you follow my channel, I picked one of those up a couple years ago because I used to play one that was there at Bullfini's. All right, I have two more. This one was from a show on the Portland Pier. This is, again, my favorite red Stratocaster. I was using my custom coupe. I remember this gig. This was a rough gig. So I don't have high hopes for this one. I'll give myself one credit if this is bad. I didn't have a monitor, and I didn't have the amp set up in a good spot based on the way that the band was all kind of set up. And because we were outdoors and by the water, there was nowhere for the sound to bounce off of. I remember this whole gig, I could not hear myself at all. So that's my disclaimer in case this is as bad as I'm afraid it might be. okay, it started off better than I thought, and then it kind of went downhill with some suspicious bends, timing issues. Better than I thought. Still not one that I'd really put on my resume. I love that song though. That's one of my songs. Still a recording of it. Now this last one, and this one I distinctly remember, and I'm gonna share with you afterwards. But this is another original song. This was a lead called "No Doubt About It." This is going back to that same gig on Cliff Island. This was a Sunburst Stratocaster, which I don't have anymore. It's another guitar that I love that I miss. And this was going into my custom coupe. So let's have a listen to this. All right, that's a good one to end on, and I'll tell you why. Kind of going back to the point, what we were talking about of sort of how do you find a lead in a song, that one of the things that I used to do is I'd play something a little different every night, and if I played something that I came out really good, this is one of the reasons I used to videotape it also, so I'd be able to play back and go, okay, what did I do there? Why did I like it so much? Or sometimes you'd listen back and go, oh, that doesn't sound as good as I thought it did on stage. I remember this one. And I remembered this solo because this was the one where I sort of finally found the lead for this song. This is another original song. This is called No Doubt About It. And it turned into this. So you can see there, and that was from that, and that in the solo on Cliff Island there, that was just like off the top of my head, but it sort of like, all of a sudden I was like, that's it, that's the lead, because before that, everything I played just didn't quite feel right, and then all of a sudden it was like, that's the one. That's what I got. All right. Wanted to share some of that with you. For anybody who watches my channel who's at any various level of guitar playing, whether you're a very advanced player and you also kind of reminisce about times past, whether you're a beginner player and you're sort of trying to find your way, it's fun to kind of look back to see where you've been, to see, are you really moving forward? Or are you kind of moving laterally? I'd say for me, there's some of both there. I definitely feel like, I don't mean to say this in a boasting way, but I definitely feel like I'm better than I was 16 years ago. I listen back to that, and some of the ones that were even kind of better, I kind of go, yeah, but I could play that smoother now. I could play it smoother and with better tone and with more command over the instrument. But there were some cool licks and things in there a couple of times that I'm like, hey, maybe I should bring that back. So it's fun to look back. Let us know what you think. Do you ever look back on your old solos just to reminisce or to see how far you've come? Or hopefully nobody's kind of like digressing. I suppose that's a possibility. I expect that will happen at some point when I get older and become less capable, but hey, thanks for tuning in. Different kind of episode of Real Guitar Talk. I'm Jack Fossett. Remember to like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.
when I came back around, you know I had to shout. If I could only tell you what your smile means to me, but in my mind you're far away, I fall down to my knees. My Rebecca,